Hi, welcome to the US 69 Noise Wall meetings. We are happy to have you here today. The project team will make a presentation that will last about 30 minutes. We are using Zoom today, so there is a chat option for you to ask questions. Please stay muted if you don't have a question or are not speaking. After the presentation, we will respond to questions in the chat or call on people who have raised their virtual hand. We will also ask for questions from any call-in users. If we aren't able to get to all the questions during the meeting timeframe, we will respond to those questions in writing at the end of the meeting, and those questions will be posted on the project website. Please note that this is being recorded and comments will be posted to the project website. Thanks very much. And I'd like to introduce Steve Rockers, the project director for the US 69 project from the Kansas Department of Transportation.
My name is Steve Rockers. I'm the project director for the 69Express project. I would like to thank everyone for taking this virtual meeting and taking the time to learn about potential noise walls. This is an important component to the overall project and will help determine what gets constructed along with the widening and addition of the express lane. KDOT has had several direct conversations with neighborhoods, HOAs, and organizations along the corridor, and we look forward to continuing these conversations and answering your questions. The presentation today will provide information on the noise study process and the results by location. We will also review the voting process. KDOT has received several questions about the noise study, and so we will cover some of those recurring questions, then open the floor to participants if they have individual questions or comments. Each meeting will focus on specific walls and answer those questions first, and the general sessions will cover all 11 walls. If we are not able to get to your questions, we will follow up in writing. Again, thank you for joining us and participating in this important process. Now I'd like John Fitzpatrick to discuss the noise study process.
Thank you, Steve. And like Steve said, we know noise is a concern for residents and businesses alike. So we want to walk you through the process for the noise study evaluation and the results. Noise studies are completed whenever a project is going to add capacity to a highway or significantly change the alignment. Because the 69Express project is adding an express lane, it falls into this category, and a traffic noise study was completed for the entire project area. First off, Federal Highways has a code of federal regulations that dictates how to conduct traffic noise analysis and analysis of any noise abatement, including noise walls. As part of that federal policy, states are required to develop their own traffic noise policy within the confines of the federal regulations. So KDOT has its own traffic noise policy approved by FHWA and is used on projects throughout the state. The noise analysis is really two major steps, which I'll touch on both right now before going into a little more detail in a minute. First, it's predicting where noise impacts occur, and the federal guidelines define what a noise impact is. Secondly, wherever noise impacts do occur, noise abatement is evaluated. When evaluating noise abatement, KDOT has defined a set of procedures following the federal guidelines to make sure noise abatement is feasible, it's cost-effective, and it's desired by the public. The goal of a traffic noise study is to identify noise impacts and determine if noise abatement at these locations meets all the qualifications. So how do we evaluate the existing and future noise conditions in the project area? As part of the federal regulations, Federal Highways has a software called the Traffic Noise Model, or TNM, which is required to be used on all traffic noise analysis. In the traffic noise model, a model is built of the project area, including the roadways, the terrain, the homes, traffic volumes, number of trucks, speeds, etc. We start off building a model of the existing conditions to understand the existing noise environment, which is then validated using field measurements to make sure the model accurately reflects the conditions in the corridor. Once our existing noise model has been validated, it is then modified to reflect the project design. In this case, that includes the express lanes, interchange reconfigurations, and any other project designs. At that point, we can then use the future traffic volumes, which are projected to be greater than existing volumes, to predict noise levels in the future everywhere in the project area during the loudest hour of the day. So we've built models representing the existing and future conditions in the corridor. How does that translate into identifying noise impacts? A noise impact is defined in one of two ways. First, if the average noise level during the loudest hour of the day is 66 decibels or higher, it is considered a noise impact. For the purposes of this noise study, this is determined by using the future conditions. So that includes the express lanes and the traffic projected in the year 2050. Many noise sensitive areas near highways already meet this threshold with today's conditions. And the traffic noise study confirmed this is the case along most of the US 69 corridor, with almost 1,000 locations already meeting that number. In the future, without any noise abatement, this number is closer to 1,500. As I mentioned previously, noise studies are only completed when capacity is being added to the highway. So even though many locations meet the 66 decibel number today, the 69 Express project is the opportunity to examine these noise impacts. The second way a noise impact is defined is if the noise levels predicted in the future are more than 10 decibels greater than the existing noise levels. This is rarely the case in highway widening projects and mostly occurs where a new highway is being constructed or the alignment is being altered significantly. No locations in the 69 Express study area are expected to have this large of an increase. Once the traffic noise impacts are identified, noise abatement is considered. There are a few different noise abatement strategies, but in a corridor similar to US 69, noise walls are the most common strategy. It's important to note that noise walls are typically only effective for about 300 feet and need to be designed properly in order to be beneficial. Beyond that 300 feet, there's usually not much noise reduction, though each site is different based on factors like the topography. One of several advantages of using the FHWA traffic noise model is not only that it can predict noise impacts in the future, but it also is used to analyze how effective different noise wall layouts would be. It enables us to optimize the alignment and the height of the wall to ensure it will benefit those impacted by noise. When analyzing noise walls, it must be both feasible and cost-effective in order to be recommended for construction. Feasibility generally deals with considering whether it is possible to build a wall given the site constraints. It can be limited by the topography, the presence of cross streets, drainage, utilities, and maintenance concerns, to name a few. The cost effectiveness is a process outlined by the federal regulations, which gives states some flexibility. For the 69 Express project, a cost-effective wall was defined as one that would require no more than 1,800 square foot of noise wall per benefited residence, which I'll explain more in a minute. If a wall is not feasible or it's not cost-effective, it will not be recommended for construction. If it is both feasible and cost-effective, it is preliminarily recommended for construction, pending a vote of all those who would benefit from the wall. So speaking of walls recommended for construction, we'd now like to share some of the results from the study. The graphic on the right shows in green the areas where noise walls are recommended. 23 different areas were identified as noise sensitive throughout the project area. Traffic noise impacts were identified in almost all of these areas. Noise walls were found to be both feasible and cost-effective at 14 different locations throughout the corridor. 11 of these locations are within the limits of the first phase of the 69 Express project, which extends from 103rd Street to 151st Street. The other 3 are located in areas of future phases of the project south of 151st Street and will be recommended for inclusion when capacity is added there. A more detailed map showing these noise wall locations is available on the project website at www.69express.org. This interactive map also shows locations where noise levels were modeled. A high-level view is shown in the image on the right, but the map online allows you to zoom in on your specific area of interest. The color of the dots indicates the results of that location from the noise analysis. When looking at multi-level residences, such as apartments, each individual floor is shown separately, since the noise properties can be very different at different elevations. Also, some dots may represent multiple receptors. For example, a single dot may be shown at a duplex, but both residences are counted as separate receptors. Green and red dots indicate whether a receptor is considered impacted by noise or over that average of 66 decibel threshold. Red dots are locations that are impacted by noise and green dots are not. You'll also note that some dots, regardless if they're green or red, have a yellow circle in the middle. Any location with a yellow circle is considered a benefited receptor, or a location that would benefit from a noise wall. So what exactly is a benefited receptor? The US Department of Transportation has set that definition. A benefited receptor is a property that is projected to receive a minimum of a 5 decibel reduction in traffic noise from a noise abatement measure, such as noise walls. While some properties might still experience a noise reduction from a noise wall, if it doesn't meet that 5 decibel minimum, they are not considered an official benefited receptor. To determine where the benefited receptors are located, as mentioned before, the detailed noise model was used, which allowed us to examine how effective different barrier locations would be and how tall they need to be to effectively reduce the noise. Generally, every receptor within about 500 feet of US 69 was looked at, though the analysis did go out further when necessary to make sure all noise impacts were captured. The model looks at exterior areas of use at each home, which are placed on the side of the home facing the highway, usually about 5 feet away from the home itself. So picture yourself walking outside of your home about 5 feet towards the highway. That's where the noise model is predicting noise impacts and analyzing how effective a noise wall would be. And just to reiterate, a receptor is considered officially benefited if at least a 5 decibel reduction is predicted to occur with a given noise wall. Now I'll pass it over to Cameron to talk more about the voting process.
All right, well, thank you, John. Now that John has walked through the study process and the results, I want to spend some time explaining the voting process and how many of you as benefited receptors have a voice in whether or not the recommended noise walls get constructed as part of the project. So as John covered, the detailed software model is used to analyze both existing and predicted future noise levels, and then to develop the noise abatement measures that can effectively reduce those noise levels. And from that analysis, the locations that will benefit from the proposed walls were identified. If it's predicted at a location that you'll see a reduction by that 5 decibel or more reduction, then those are the locations that are identified as benefited receptors. So the next step in the process is to solicit input via a vote from those benefited receptors. To solicit that input, ballots have been mailed to all the identified benefited receptors, asking them to vote for or against the proposed walls that are adjacent to their property. KDOT will then tally the ballots that are returned, and if 70% or more of the votes received are in favor of the noise walls, then it will be constructed as part of the project. The reason why the threshold is 70% and not just a simple majority is that noise walls are a major investment, and KDOT wants to ensure that there is strong community support for the walls before they make that investment. I do also want to emphasize here that the results of whether or not the noise walls are constructed will be based on the ballots that we receive back, regardless of the number of ballots that we received. There is no minimum threshold for responses or a required response rate. So with that in mind, we very much encourage those of you that receive ballots to return those to us. And I will talk here in a few minutes about ways that you can return your ballot and make sure that it is counted. So since the benefited receptors are the ones that are eligible to vote on the walls, they were notified directly by letter, over 1,400 individual letters and ballots, about this meeting and other opportunities to meet with the project team to learn more about the proposed noise walls that are coming out of the study. We want to make sure that there is an opportunity for them to be informed and to have an opportunity to ask questions of the team before they make a decision. But just because we reached out to them directly, it does not mean that these meetings are closed only to the benefited receptors. Anyone is welcome to attend, and we certainly encourage attendance by anyone that's interested. As such, these meetings have been publicized in a variety of ways through media and social media to try and get the word out. So we've discussed how the benefited receptors were identified and the opportunity that they have to vote on the proposed walls, but you may be asking, what are they actually voting on? So I want to provide a little bit of clarity on that. So as we've already said, this is an important part of the step because under both federal and KDOT policies, the recommended noise walls cannot be built unless there is a strong desire by the community and from the benefited receptors for them to be constructed. But in terms of what they're voting on, very simply, benefited receptors are voting on whether they do or do not want a noise wall adjacent to their location as is proposed coming out of the detailed noise study. These are essentially up or down votes based on the walls as we're showing them to you now and as we can talk through during questions and answers. But because this is an up or down vote, based on what we're proposing out of the noise study, there are a handful of elements that are not part of the voting process. I'll cover those on the next slide. So those items are shown here. Items like the type and material of the wall or the physical attributes such as the placement, the length or height, those are not part of the voting process. And the reason for that is because those elements, if they were to change, could significantly alter the effectiveness or the feasibility of the walls. Additionally, items related to visual appearance are also not part of the voting process. So the wall material, the color, surface design, those have all been selected to balance aesthetics and cost and long-term maintenance of the walls. But with respect to aesthetics, the intent with this project is to maintain a consistent look as what has already been built in many other locations in Overland Park on other segments of either US 69 or I-435. And we've shown here a couple of examples of what these walls look like, not necessarily from a roadway perspective. Many of you are probably familiar with that as you've driven the corridor already. but more from the perspective of an adjacent property owner. As we get into questions and answers, we do have some other examples that we can bring up, and we hope to be able to provide a sense of what these walls could look like from your property. So if you are a benefited receptor, hopefully by now you have received by mail a letter from the team and a ballot that is unique to you. And the ballots are unique to each benefited receptor for a couple of different reasons. Number one, we want to ensure that there is integrity in the voting process. And two, we want to ensure that we're considering the votes on a location by location basis. It's possible that some locations will be for a proposed wall and others not in favor. So again, I've said it a couple of times, we very much encourage you to consider this decision and return that unique ballot to us, letting us know if you are for or against constructing those specific wall adjacent to your property. And there's a number of ways that you can return the ballot, and those are listed here. You can either scan or take a photo of the ballot and email it to the address that you see here on the screen. You may return your ballot by mail using the addressed and stamped envelope that was included with your ballot. Or you may drop it off in person at either Overland Park City Hall or at H&TV's office, which the address is listed here. I do want to make it clear that while we provide a number of different opportunities for you to submit your ballot, please only do that one time. Excuse me. Duplicate submissions or conflicting ballots from the same location will be discarded and not counted. So please only submit the ballot one time. The last thing I want to cover before we get into some frequently asked questions is if you have not yet received a letter and a ballot from us and you believe that you should have, what does that process look like? So that is really outlined here on this slide. If you feel like we've made a mistake or the information we've provided shows that you are a benefited receptor and you've not yet received a ballot, we obviously want to know that. So we encourage you to reach out to our team directly, and we can work with you to address your concern or answer questions about why your location is or is not a benefited receptor. Okay, so before we open up the meeting for questions from all of you, I do want to share some frequently asked questions and provide some responses to those. These are compiled from the comments and questions we've received on the information that we presented at our last public meeting in early December of 2021. So there's some definite themes that have emerged from that, and we'd like to share some of those answers with you up front. So starting off with the first question, I'm actually going to turn this back over to John to handle the first question, and then we'll tag team a couple of these as we go along. John?
Yeah, so that first question, my house has a green dot, or I live next to someone who gets to vote. Why not me? So as a reminder, only those who are predicted to receive at least a 5 decibel reduction are able to vote on the wall. If you live next to someone who gets to vote, you will probably experience some noise reduction from a noise wall, but it's not quite at that 5 decibel level, which is defined by the federal guidelines. And again, these reductions that are predicted are determined using the detailed traffic noise model from federal highways.
Okay, so the next question about why aren't walls being built south of 151st Street? Well, I want to clarify first that the noise study did evaluate noise through the entire corridor going all the way down to 179th Street. And the noise study does recommend walls in 3 locations that are in that segment between 151st Street and 179th Street. However, noise walls are only constructed in locations where the highway is being expanded with new capacity or new lanes. So for this near-term project, the expansion of US 69 is all north of 151st Street. So that is where the walls will be constructed as part of this near-term project. South of 151st Street, those might be included in a future expansion of US 69 when that moves forward down the line. The next question, what about trees on my property? Will building the wall remove them? So this is a very common question, and one that I think is important for everyone to consider. So in many locations, there are trees and shrubs along the line that divides the highway right of way that KDOT owns from private or city-owned property outside the highway right of way. And the answer to whether these will be impacted by the project depends, but it kind of fits into a couple of different categories. Generally speaking, if the trees are located on private property, they won't be removed. There may need to be some trimming and those sorts of things, but they would not be completely removed. On the other side, if the trees are located on KDOT right-of-way and the proposed noise walls are situated at or near the right-of-way line, it is very likely that those are going to be impacted as part of the project. This is a bit of a case-by-case situation. But if they're on KDOT's right away, I believe there is a likelihood that there's going to be some impact to those trees and shrubs.
Yeah, and the next one is a common question we get. What time of day did you do the noise modeling? And the noise modeling always considers the loudest hour of the day. This usually occurs during the peak traffic hour, so that AM or PM rush, or just before or after that peak traffic hour, if the rush hour causes slowdowns and therefore reduced speeds and reduced noise emissions. The next question, did you test or model different types of driving surfaces? The federal guidelines require the use of what's called an average pavement when determining noise impacts. While different pavement types can cause different noise levels, it's typically only a couple decibels above or below this average pavement type, which for some perspective is considered barely perceptible by the human ear. Using this average pavement when modeling also accounts for the changes in pavement that occurs over time, which are constantly occurring. The actual pavement type used for the 69Express project will be determined by the design build team.
Okay, and then question, what are you doing about jake braking? So we have gotten several questions about jake braking. A lot of folks noting that this is a big contributor to noise along the US 69 corridor. And I'm glad that this is getting brought up. We had an opportunity to look into this, and jake braking is actually already prohibited along US 69. So the best way to affect this is by encouraging increased enforcement of this existing ordinance. So if you're experiencing this, we encourage you to contact the non-emergency number for the Overland Park Police to report it. That number is available on the website. So I'd ask you to go find that and report that if that's something that you're experiencing frequently. And then the last question, when will the walls be built? So in terms of when the walls will be built, unfortunately, this is something that we can't provide a specific response on. The reason for this is that we're intentionally providing a great deal of flexibility to the contractor on how they want to progress the work on all of the improvements that are part of the 69Express project. We're not, say, requiring them to build the noise walls first, mostly because the erection of the walls can significantly limit their ability to access the site, get equipment and materials into the areas where they're trying to work. What I can say, just based on experience on other projects in this corridor that have had noise walls, I would predict that the noise wall construction will likely occur in the back half of the construction timeline. So that would put the majority of these walls under construction in the 2024 to 2025 timeframe. So with that, this concludes the presentation portion of the meeting. Again, we appreciate you being here, and we'll now open it up for questions and answers from the group.